let me ask a few questions first. Who of you knows what vSAN is? Quick show of hands, all right. It's a good base. Who of you has used vSAN? All right, even better. Who of you feels proficient in using vSAN? All right, are you ready for some demos? Show of hands. All right. Now, before we get into that, this is the disclaimer. You know the drill. Everything I say will be used against me by Duncan, but aside from that, everything I say, might never ship. We can't promise any dates when it might ship. These are just ideas that we're presenting to you, but it's a bunch of stuff that we've been thinking about, working towards, that we want to share with you, but absolutely no promises about when it might ship. All right, with that out of the way, let's get started. But before we start, there will be the fun section of this presentation where I will do one slide, one demo, one slide, one demo. But before that, a little bit of background, a little bit of setting the stage for what we're talking about. When we started with vSAN, we were really thinking about building storage. But I think we've evolved from that. We've really been thinking about how to build HCI. Right? And what we define as HCI is really the integration of vSAN, of vSphere, and the hardware. Right? Taking all of that together, and we've heard from a lot of you that you would like for us to define HCI to even include NSX, vRealize, the full stack that VMware has to offer. But let's just take the stack of vSphere, vSAN, and hardware, and you basically have two models of buying that today. You have the model of going to a ready node, and we have over 15 OEM vendors that are producing different ready nodes. We have, I think, almost up to 200 ready nodes by now. Right. By the way, I completely forgot to introduce myself. I just assume you know me. I'm Christian. I'm the architect for the vSAN development team, and this is Junchi. He's my partner in crime on the product management side. We're developing all this together, and he will cover some later parts in this presentation. Sorry about that. Let's get back to the session. On the ready node side, we have a very flexible HCL. And although we have around 200 ready nodes, what we actually find is that you guys don't buy those. What you guys are doing is you take those ready nodes, take them as suggestions, like a red light, and then you actually go ahead and customize those to whatever you want. You add additional components, you remove some stuff, you change some stuff based on our very flexible HCL underneath. And then the other way of buying vSAN, and we see that being just as popular, is buying it through VxRail. It's sold by Dell EMC, powered by vSAN as a fully integrated appliance that is opinionated about the hardware, that is opinionated about the software, that has everything built into one box. And we have both models, and we actually are very proud of having both models because we want to enable you to have choice. And VxRail is a fantastic choice, but I'm today going to focus more on the basic vSAN and the ready node concept and what we're doing on that front, and less on the VxRail side. So I actually shamelessly stole the first two slides from my last year's presentation. I was lazy, so I literally took them, but that's okay because this slide is really about our mission, and our mission doesn't change every year. Our mission is, what stays with us for multiple years, and we're, applying that mission year after year. And what you see today is us presenting, what's the next step in that journey. So what's our mission? And really, we want to build a radically simple HCI with choice. And for that, we want to build something that's really simple to buy, really simple to set up, really simple to operate, and really importantly, we're not building this for the storage admin. Sure, storage admins will be using vSAN, and there will be a lot of storage admins out there, but we really want to empower a vSphere admin, or put in a different way, a converged team, where a single team of experts, of cloud infrastructure experts can manage the compute and the storage together as a single entity. And the other part of the mission is we have customers that are running 2-node all the way up to running thousands of nodes. And that's very important. And those people that are running 2 nodes, a lot of them have thousands of 2 nodes. And so all that spectrum from really small to really large is something we need to cover, and that's really important to us. The other thing is, if you're running 1,000 or 2,000 or 3,000 of these 2 nodes, you're not going to do all that manually. So everything you do in the modern data center needs to be fully automatable. And when you read William Lamb's blogs, for example, there's tons of information around how to use our SDKs to achieve that. Now, what does this mean? How do we translate that high-level mission into something more tangible? And the really tangible stuff is going to be in the demos. But what's our guiding principle? And it's we like the appliance. We hear from you, you like the appliance because it gives you something. It gives you ease of use. It gives you peace of mind. It makes things easy. But actually what we also hear is you like choice. So what we want to do is an appliance-like experience, but with more choice. And that's what we're looking at from a pure vSAN perspective. And again, VxRail is always there. And for us, that means that we need to deeply integrate vSphere and vSAN and all the workflows together. And for that, what you're actually going to see is I'm not going to talk much about vSAN per se. I'm going to talk a lot about vSphere and a lot about questioning every single knob in vSphere. And you've been, I assume, with VMware and VMware technologies for quite a while, and you've seen vSphere grow over time, add tons of different knobs, add tons of different features, and we're thinking about how to reimagine this with this HCI lens. And ultimately, it's about simplicity and choice. So this is a slide, coming more from our product marketing, product management side, trying to show off, what are all the things that we've done. And if you followed VMworlds, this is pretty much aligned with our releases and VMworlds, starting with a native integration in 5.5 where we had the management built into vSphere, but then adding a lot of features around visibility, adding lots of health checks, adding lots of deeper management capabilities, proactive tests, going and expanding on that around performance management, SDKs, power CLIs, first VROps integrations, and I think with vSAN 6.6 that we launched in April and now 6.6.1 that we launched in July, we have a very rich set of features. If you look at our, this session last year, we presented 6 features in new demos, that were going towards that. We showed how we can patch firmwares. We showed how we can patch drivers. We showed how we can make VC installation simpler around lifecycle. We showed a lot of these kind of things, and they shipped in 6.6 and 6.6.1. So that's where we are today. That's what we've shipped. But today we want to talk much more about what we're thinking about for the future. So when we think about the future, what are our focus areas? What are the things where we see the biggest potential? Obviously, when we listen to you, we hear tons of different things that you would like for us to improve and where you see us having potential for improvement. But what are the things that we hear most? The biggest pain points that we can do something about? And those are really in 3 different categories. One is all about easier lifecycle. How can you install and patch the system more easily? The second is around rich monitoring. Having a modern UI, I will get to that in a second, having deep VROps integration, being able to inspect the hardware, going up and down the stack and having full visibility on everything going on. And then a new area for us that we started exploring last year is really infrastructure analytics. Using analytics, using cloud-connected features, using machine learning to ultimately save on operations costs, reduce risk, and make it easy for you to operate vSAN day to day. And we're going to go into performance analytics as well as how we're redefining our support experience when you call us or even when we call you. So with that, who's ready for demos now? All right. By the way, I got the feedback last year to do live demos. I don't think I can do live demos. First, I don't have the guts. Second of all, this is such a large team, so many different things that we are showing. I have to rely on a whole bunch of people recording demos for me, and it would be, I'm lazy. This is much, much easier for me. So the first demo is all about the HTML5 client. I hope this is not a surprise to you. You've been asking us, why isn't it shipping yet? So I assume this is not a big surprise to you. This is something you've been wanting all along. So for that, quick show of hands, who is sad that the Flex client is going away? Well, who's happy it's going away? All right. Not a big surprise here. So the goal, of course, is to have 100% feature parity for vSAN, but this doesn't just apply to vSAN, this applies to the whole stack, but given that this is more about vSAN, we're pointing that out. Now, for this we have a little demo, and the demo is essentially supposed to tell you that, well, it's feature parity. And so we have a modern look and feel, faster, all the kind of things that you were asking us about. And for the most part, we kept what we had, right? We had workflows that worked, but what was lacking was really, in terms of having a modern UI, not relying on Flex, having it faster. So we kept a lot of the workflows that were working well. And so, for example, disk management, I think, worked pretty well. We've been fine-tuning it in places where it can improve, but for the most part, it's staying the way it was, and allowing mass claim operations. On the health side, we've actually spent a little bit of time reimagining how vSAN Health can look like. Spent a lot of time with our user experience team and talking to customers about how we can make that simpler. And so they came up with a cool new layout that you see here. For how to lay out vSAN Health, and it has the same information but presented in a nicer way. On the virtual object side, for example, we've also reimagined this. So initially, this view when we first launched vSAN was only showing you VMs and the VMDKs. We've added swap and all the other kind of constituent pieces of VMs. We've added iSCSI that we launched and making sure that we show every single piece that's stored on vSAN, whether it's associated to a VM or unregistered or just lying on vSAN. We are basically showing you everything that's on vSAN. And more importantly, we provide you with a bunch of filters so you can filter by object type, you can filter by availability. So if you want to just look at the inaccessible VMs, there's a very easy way to get to that and all the richness. Capacity views are basically carried over. They now look prettier. The performance graphs, same functionality but looks prettier and faster. And basically all the screens that you're used to, they're all there. Just nicer to use. One thing that has really changed is, we got a lot of feedback that the storage policy-based management had grown to be a little unwieldy. Because we've introduced RAID 5, RAID 6, we've introduced stretch clustering, we've introduced site locality, we've introduced site local protection, and now setting up all these policies was getting unwieldy. And why was that? Because we were actually focused on a partner ecosystem, right? We wanted to have one set of tools that VMworld as well as vSAN would use. But that framework, it's a good framework, but actually the user experience was lacking. So we have really worked with our user experience team to reimagine those workflows. So now we have a native, non-data-driven UI for this. You can nicely pick. You have stretch cluster. We have inline validation of all the settings. So all these things, VM encryption, all built into a single, nicely designed workflow. So this is getting a lot simpler to use, especially with proliferation of more policies that we now have in the product. But overall, this demo is really just to show, we're finally doing what you've asked us all along. Give us a modern UI, build it into the H5 client, and get it out the door. Well, on getting out the door, I can't promise anything here. All right. So now, that's just the framework. Now, I have to tell you, because of the timing, not everything I'm going to show you today will actually be in the H5 client. So some of the demos will actually be still using the Flex client, but that's just a timing thing for VMworld where we can't really make sure that everything is already in the new look and feel. So think about it more in terms of functionality that we're trying to explore. The second big area for us is firmware patching and patching in general. Patching ESX, patching firmwares. And what we launched in 6.6 was the capability to do firmware patching of controllers. And that was very important and very well received, and we heard from a lot of you that you love this capability. But we also heard from you, and somebody on Twitter pointed out nicely, apparently VMware forgot that we already had a tool to do patching with VUM, and we should have integrated with that, and we actually agree with that. So what we're showing here is two things. One, we've integrated all the firmware patching capabilities into VUM. Second, we're showing what we did in 6.6.1 that shipped in July. We've integrated, and we demoed that last year, integrated driver, patches, and those kind of things that we automatically set up VUM to the recommended HCL settings, and VUM gets auto-configured, and you just need to confirm, and thereby getting a one-click experience. But we're also going one step further. We're not just integrating the SCSI controller patching, but we're actually doing the full box. Your BIOS, your NIC, your hard drives, your SAS expanders. I don't even know exactly what a SAS expander is, but apparently I need to patch it. Right? And I personally didn't know how to do it. And well, we had to learn so that you don't have to figure it out. So this is basically putting it all into an umbrella. Now, aside from firmware patching, we're also making sure that VUM is getting faster. I don't know if you know this, but today, if you're upgrading from 6.0 to 6.5, VUM will actually reboot the server twice for no good reason. So Duncan has been complaining about this quite a bit, and now it's one reboot going forward, as we hope. And further, what you've told us is, and I will get into that, you want us to put more guardrails in. You want to remediate a whole cluster, but you want to make sure that that's safe. So we'll talk about that. So with that, let's get into the demo setup. For this demo setup, we're using some lab hardware, and our lab is by now pretty old, so we're running a Dell R720. I'm not saying that that's actually what this feature is targeting, it's just what we happen to have in the lab. We have around 200 of these machines, and well, they are unsupported by now on 6.5. That's our problem, but well, they're not supported, and that's actually an interesting scenario. So what vSAN is going to do in this demo is, vSAN is going to recommend to go to 6.5 update 3. In fact, update 3 with patch 05 installed on top of it. And we're going to do a Dell firmware upgrade all in one step. So let's get into this demo. Is this running? All right. So what you're going to see here is basically, we're going into iDRAC, and we see that we have a BIOS version of 2.2.2, and we have an iDRAC version, and we're going to update the system. So in VUM, what we're going to see is basically, what we shipped in 6.6.1 was we had a baseline group for this cluster. We set up that, the ESX baseline. We set up the patch level. So update 3, patch 05. And then on top, now there's a new line, and you see, little UI glitches, and our user experience team and our QA team were very quick to point out that this is wrong, this is not compliant. But what you see here is that we added a new baseline for firmware. And when you click on that, what you see is you see additional information. It says that we're going to update the BIOS from 2.2.2 to 2.5.4, and we're going to update iDRAC. All the other components we could be patching, like NICs and physical disks and so on and so forth, but in this case they're already patched, they're already the latest, so we can skip that. So this is the situation. We've already set up all this automatically. We explained that we are not updating to 6.5 because it's not supported, and so far you haven't done anything. You just go to this page and it's all automatic. Next thing you do, okay, that looks weird. Next thing you do is you open up the remediate wizard, and you say you want to update this host. This could be a rolling upgrade if this was actually a cluster of hosts. You click next, 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 and by the way, this is also getting simpler. And you click finish, and what's happening in the background now is that we are going to do all the heavy lifting. So we put the host into maintenance mode. VUM calls over to the vSAN subcomponent to tell it to do the firmware patching. So that task is now started. We are going to use like rack ADM built into Virtual Center to, underneath the covers, contact the iDRAC, send over the firmware packages, and do all that. So the remediation is running. We fast forward because firmware patching takes a moment. And what we see is, after the firmware has been patched, VUM moved on and did the install of the software. So it updated to update 3, patch 05. After updating the firmware, it then initiated one host reboot. So we've done both of them at the same time with a single rolling reboot. And afterwards, it took the host back out of maintenance mode, and now it's fully updated. Ignore that there's a few error messages in here as well. This is a demo setup that was, just done last minute. But what we can see is now, actually, there's no longer a firmware baseline because it's all up to date, and we can go to iDRAC and into the firmware, and we see that we have the new versions of both of these. So one click for you, but a lot of stuff happening underneath the covers, and so for you, very simple workflow, and you have everything happening. Out of time, I can't show you a demo about this. I actually have a demo in here, but I'm skipping that. We also wanted to make sure that we have the right guardrails. Because a lot of you have, so let me ask you this. How many of you remediate just a single host versus a cluster? Who of you only does a single host at a time? All right, and who likes to remediate whole clusters? Who would like to remediate whole clusters as long as it was safe? All right, so I think we're on the right track here. Basically, what we're doing in this is we first check whether the cluster is healthy. You shouldn't be starting the upgrade probably if it's not healthy. So we don't force that, but we let you know right there, is it healthy before you proceed. If it's not healthy, we warn you. Second then, and this is the interesting part now, we let the host proceed. It goes through the rolling upgrade. The host goes down, comes back up, and whatever went wrong, I mean, hopefully we have no bugs, hopefully Dell has no bugs. We hope that nothing in this has any bugs, that there's nothing going wrong with the hardware, that the power reset didn't make the hardware, the disk drive go bad. We hope all that. But, shit happens. So what we're doing now is before we take the host back out of maintenance mode, so before the host actually starts contributing back storage, and before it starts contributing back to running VMs, we check it. We run the full gamut of vSAN health checks, make sure that everything is kosher. Then we take it out of maintenance mode, and then we check again, just in case, because now it's actually actively contributing storage. It's a target for VMs. Now we check again, is it still all looking good? If it is, we move on. This doesn't add much to the overall upgrade cycle. This is a few seconds. But it really adds those guardrails to make sure that we abort the upgrade, and maybe you have one host that ended up in a bad state. That's fine. I mean, it's not great, but it's fine. It's much better than having all hosts in a bad state. So that's a very important thing for us, that make sure that not just our UI allows you to do a whole cluster, but actually you feel good about doing a whole cluster because we have all the guardrails in place. All right. With that, next topic. Next slide, next demo. So for this, we really wanted to reimagine how vSphere sets up clusters. I mean, how to set up a cluster hasn't changed in, I believe, 10 years. We've added more and more stuff, but this hasn't really changed. But we now have been working with the vSphere team. How can we fundamentally make this easier? And when, everybody who's used VxRail or has seen demos of VxRail, this is really easy in VxRail, and there's absolutely no reason why we should make this hard on somebody who just buys vSphere. And so what we're doing here is you've deployed VC, either externally or onto vSAN. That's the starting point. And now you're trying to create the cluster, really add all the hosts, set up HA, DRS, networking, the VM KNX. You're trying to do all those setup steps. And we want to make that simple. So for that, let's roll the demo. So you click on the data center, you click new cluster just like you do today. You enter the name, you basically say that you want DRS, HA, and vSAN, and you get to, well, let's pause it here. So what you briefly saw was a place that I will go to in just a second again. But the next step is we're going to add the hosts. In this step, basically, in the previous UI, you needed to do one host at a time. And that was around 7 to 8 clicks or something like that. And so if you added 16 hosts, that was quite a lot of clicks, or you need to go to the CLI to automate this. Now you can just enter all the IP addresses. You enter the username and password once, assuming it's all the same for all the servers. Otherwise, you need to enter them one by one. And then you can also select any standalone host in the inventory that you've already added to the inventory. Either way, you can add those two together. We will now verify those, make sure that the thumbprints are what you expected them to be. And then we get to this screen. And now we're going to do a whole bunch of validation. Same thing that we were talking about in VAM, putting guardrails in. So now, what we heard a lot, that you want to make sure that we have validated everything before the hosts actually become active, right? In the workflow. So here we're going to validate that the hosts are in good shape. That's before we even add them to the inventory. Then we add them to the inventory, but we add them in maintenance mode. So again, making it safe that these hosts are not going to disrupt anything. Oh, damn it, now I skipped ahead too far. How do I go back?
There's a bar here.
No, there's no bar.
Oh.
Right, I think I need to roll this from the beginning. That's not a big deal. So the key thing is that what we're going to do now, and let's wait for the demo to catch up, is we're going to do a whole bunch of validations at the point of once we have added the hosts, now we can run the full gamut of tests on these hosts. And we make sure that all the firmware is the right firmware and all that kind of stuff. And let's wait for this. And only then do you proceed to the next step. You now proceed to actually configuring the cluster. So we want to make sure that we have this intermediate point where we stop, take a breather, and actually validate everything, and make sure to give you the perspective of having validated everything before moving on. Okay, this is skipped in this video. So that's why I didn't catch it. All right. So the next step is that we are going to configure all the rest of the services. So we've integrated the VDS configuration into this wizard. So now you just say, how many physical networks are you attached to? How are my physical NICs attached to the physical networks? So very flexible. Again, in VxRail, we assume a certain hardware topology. Even in VMware Cloud Foundation, we assume a certain hardware topology. But here we know we're dealing with ready nodes. You might have 2 NICs, you might have 4 NICs, you might have 6 NICs. We don't know what to expect, so we need to allow you to set up all these different combinations. And we do. You can also skip this whole thing because maybe you don't have a VDS license and you want to just skip all this. The next step is VMK NICs. So again, today you need to go and set up all these VMK NICs individually, and here we have one screen integrated. You set up vMotion, you set up vSAN, and you specify the VLAN, you specify the IP addresses either at the range or individually, and you do that for vMotion, you do that for vSAN, and then you get to configure the services. So again, by default now, and this is new, although it shouldn't have been, by default we will now actually honor our own best practices. That makes sense, but we haven't done it so far. So now really, all the best practices that you would normally need to go read up in a document, now you can be sure that we've actually taken care of those. But maybe you don't want the best practice. Maybe you actually want something different because out of your business need, you wanted to tune that. And what we've heard from a lot of you is you do want to tune, you do want to adjust to your business needs. So here you can do that. You can change a whole bunch of different settings, all the way down to setting up NTP and lockdown mode and those kind of things. Aside from basic HA, vSAN, and DRS settings, you claim the disks. Basically, you just confirm that vSAN has done its job. You set up fault domains. And finally, you hit finish, and we're going to set up the whole thing. So no longer hunting for all the different screens that combine HA, DRS, the VDS, the port groups, the VMK NICs, all of that stuff is all a single wizard, a single guided workflow that at the end, you are set up to best practices. And as you see here on this screen, we have ensured that we've run additional health checks at the end so that if there is follow-up action, maybe you need to now patch a firmware because we've detected that actually that's not working, or we detected the physical network that you entered, that's not working. So you have follow-up steps and we will validate that. All right, so I think that's pretty exciting, right? So now we have set up the cluster, made that really easy. Last year we showed how to set up the VC really easy. Now we've set up the cluster really easy. That gets your whole setup workflow. Maybe you needed to patch firmware. We've shown you how to do that. We've shown you how to get to the latest patch. So the whole life cycle is covered now. But that's all just set up and upgrade. What about running in operations, right? As more and more of you build bigger and bigger vSAN deployments, what we hear a lot is about, how do you manage the day-to-day? How do you transfer the expertise that you've gained to the ops team and those kind of things? And for that, we really wanted to see what we can do in terms of analytics. How can we use a cloud connection, and how can we use machine learning, and how can we use this data to really help you with operations. And for this, what we've done is, in 6.6 we already shipped, and we demoed this last year, the cloud-connected vSAN Health. So, the story was basically, there's a new KB coming out, we learned something, you didn't read the KB, because, well, who reads KBs? But we validated it, we rewrote an online health check. Now your environment shows that you have actually a health issue because you're running that specific control that this KB is about. You don't have the advanced configurations option set that we recommended in the KB. We realized that we show you a health check and we show you whether you're yellow or green, and we show you how to remediate. So that's a really nice feature that we see a lot of people adopting in 6.6. In 6.6.1, we shipped a nice feature to do performance analytics initially for benchmarking. Help you understand how to tune your system and how to tune your benchmarks. But now what we want to show you is a reimagined support experience. Who of you has seen the Skyline announcement that we did here at VMworld? All right, that's a fair number. So this ties into Skyline, but we're bringing in really deep vSAN expertise into this program, so I want to show you that. So for that, let's roll the demo. So this is a demo that's actually interesting because this is normally something we don't do. Because this is a demo not of what you are going to see, but this is a demo about us. And typically we don't talk about how we run our internal operations, but I wanted to show you this because you will gain a lot of benefit from this. So think about the following. Think about the situation that you called up GSS. I mean, who of you had this experience? Who of you has called up GSS? All right. Who of you was annoyed that their first question and second question and third question is about log bundles? All right, that's pretty much everybody who has ever called GSS. All right. So we're just as annoyed about this process. So we said, we've built the cloud-connected health. We're taking all this anonymized telemetry data, and we have it now to run these health checks. What about if we use that now to redo our support experience? And this is something we're currently working on. It's not something that if you call after this session, you call up GSS, this is what you will get. But this is something we're thinking about and working towards. And so basically today, when you call up GSS, they are blind. Right? They don't know your environment. You haven't sent them anything. You first need to collect the log balance so that they can see. Now we're actually bringing some light into this darkness. So what GSS can do is basically you call in, they look up your UUID, it takes a few seconds, and they're getting this view. And in this view, we basically have replicated something that looks similar to the vSphere web client. Right? We have the host on the left side, the cluster on the left side. We have the main dashboard with basic information around versions, around hardware, about utilization. We have performance graphs. We have alarms. We have whatever changed in this environment. But what you can also see on the left is it's all anonymized. We don't know what you named your cluster. We don't know what you named your host. We don't know your IP addresses. And frankly, we don't care. Right? We want to understand, do you have dedupe enabled? How many hosts do you have? Do you see any alarms? Right? What's your performance like? We don't care what you named things. We don't care about your sensitive information. We just care about the high level. So we can actually now go and inspect a whole bunch of different things. We can inspect the configuration covering vSAN, HA, DRS, all the way down to advanced config options. So if you've tuned those, we can see that. And we can see what the impact of that is. We can look at vSAN Health. We can look at every single health check. We can see this setup has congestion. We get the link to the KB article just like you do. So a lot of this is what you are already seeing day to day, but now GSS can see that when you call in without you having to do anything. So we see dedupe ratios and such. We see the disks. But we can also go deep into performance graphs. So we can flip over to a Grafana-based UI where we can go back multiple days. We have around 20 different dashboards where we can go really, really deep into vSAN. So if you have a case that's complicated, and sometimes that happens, our engineering team has everything that they need to diagnose the issue without you sending further information. We can also go back in time. So oftentimes problems that are all about changes in the infrastructure. So maybe we want to see how the system looked like a day ago, and we have hourly snapshots, and we can do that. So that's great. But we can also now go into performance issues. So, let's assume storage I/O was slow. And as in any good demo, you will see that it's not actually vSAN's fault. So let's assume we have this performance issue. You called us. We look at this environment, and we see on the right-hand side that there's a lot of things called TCP layer exception. So we see that our GSS folks see that there is a suspicion that there's actually a networking issue. We go to the networking dashboard, and what we see in the networking dashboard is that there's a loss rate. The physical NICs are actually losing up to 50% of all the packets. Well, that's not good. That's not going to be good for vSAN for vSAN performance. So this is actually our problem. We need to investigate. Our software told us right away. So you call up GSS. The analysis has already been done. They know what the problem is. They have the supporting information. They can drill deep and look up everything they need. So we hope that that's going to speed up your support experience quite a bit. Now, I just said that we already run this analysis when you call in. So, so for this example, actually, we can go into and check the configuration. So we can also check like VMK NICs and physical NICs and so on and so forth. And for one internal setup, we found that one NIC was 1G, another everything else was 10G, and that was actually causing a performance problem. And this is actually the story I want to get to, which is what we saw was we ran this internally. And we looked at this anonymized data, and we found that some of our internal systems actually had performance issues they didn't know about. They had never called us. They had never let us know that there's any problem. Their customers had never complained, but they were just getting a relatively slow vSAN, and they probably just assumed that's the way it is. That's just what we're getting. They didn't really drill deep. They didn't really investigate because, well, they had other stuff to do. So this might happen with you as well, and we see that happening. So how about we flip this on its head? We've run the performance analytics. We know that there's a problem. We not only know that there's a problem, we know that it's a networking problem, and we have a whole bunch of supporting information. So how about we call you? So in this scenario, the idea is that we have a proactive support dashboard where your TSE, if you have, for example, you have Premier Support, Business Critical, Mission Critical, your TSE sees your environments. He can see what's going wrong. He can look up this wealth of information again in this environment browser where we can see your environment. They can triage, spend a few minutes, use the domain expertise, figure out what exactly to tell you, and then they can call you up and actually have a conversation with you about the situation, figure out next steps, and remediate the issue. In this case, we have really bad latency, and we would really like to call up this customer that has these latencies so that we can address the problem. All right, does it sound good? Do you want this?
Turn on it.
All right. Are you fine sending us some information so that we can do this? All right. Yes, so what you need to do is you need to enable CEIP, and that enables this. Now, we know that we owe you more information. We are not interested in anything sensitive, but we owe you explanations, a PDF that you can give to your security team, to your legal team to make sure everything is kosher. And so we know that we need to provide some more stuff. So as we're trying to roll this out, we'll provide that information to make it safe for you, that you have the peace of mind that we're not abusing any of this, and we have no intention. We don't care. Like, we want to just improve your support experience and your day-to-day experience. And with that, my part is over, very sadly, and I'm heading off to Junshi to...
He wants to keep on the manageability. Okay.
All right.
How many minutes left?
You're fine.
Yeah. So first question, how many of you actually deploy VOps and use it? Raise your hands. Quite a few. Yeah. So for those of you who actually run vSAN and also use VOps, you probably started with MPSD with a previous version of vSAN or VOps. And gradually we work towards our more native dashboards. In our latest VOps 6.6, it gives better support for vSAN in terms of dashboards, visibility of all things under vSAN. So that helps a lot from our customer feedbacks. But towards in the future, what we're trying to do is about two things. One is we keep on we actually working closely with the VOps team to commit to provide more deeper insights and monitoring of vSAN within the VOps UI, so that for those of you who actually monitor through VOps UI, continue to benefit a lot from the products. Actually, have great benefits and insights into vSAN as well. The other great point that we are trying to work towards is we are trying to, for those of you actually who standardize on vCenter UI for HCI operations, we are thinking, why not we bring those great VOps powerful features like rich dashboards and the capacity management into single pane of glass under vCenter or H5 client. And I think that's something I'm going to show you in a demo. Yeah. So this is actually a dashboard that we shipped with VOps 6.6. As you can see, this is our overall summary of dashboards for multiple vSAN clusters. In the above, in the top bar, it actually shows environment summary for all the vSAN possible clusters in your vCenters. So it's aggregate information. It gives you overall aggregate information of host information, the total VMs. It also shows you the sparkline of the trend of the VMs or IOPS over time. So give you a sense of the trend and the history. Down the road, actually, you can also use this dashboard to actually choose specific cluster, vSAN cluster, in your overall vCenter among all the vSAN cluster. Assuming that you have multiple vSAN cluster up and running, you want to deep dive into a specific cluster. You can also use this dashboard to look up for per cluster view. Once you select the cluster, remaining of the dashboard will just show the summary of operations insights for just the selected cluster. Like in the middle, you can see the cluster summary in terms of VMs, hosts, capacity usage. Even it brings you to the same page of the CPU memory utilization as well in a single UI. On the right, it also tells you what is the cluster level performance in terms of the key metrics that you care, IOPS, latency, and throughput. On the left button, it also shows you the alert trend. What are those critical alerts and warnings that over time that you can see, and you can actually double click on those alerts to see what is going on in your environment. So this is pretty much powerful actually. If you go daily basis into your office, you can start to working with dashboard and see how you want to work towards solving some problems on your environment. Going next, it's also gives you another native dashboard about what vSAN is doing with capacity utilization. Also, the same idea on the top bar, it gives you an overall summary of capacity utilization aggregated for multiple clusters in your data center. Things like hosts, how many total disk groups, how many capacity disks are there, capacity utilization, aggregated information. Also gives you used capacity summary, and also give you the total capacity saving over time with the dedupe and compression of all flash if you turn on. Also, same idea here. You can select per cluster, and remaining dashboard will just reflect accordingly for the cluster. You can actually get the dedupe view. You can actually get the dedupe view saving ratio as well per cluster as well. It also tells you based on your current utilization what are the remaining days that you are going to run out of space. Not only the capacities in terms of storage, there's VOps also tells you what are the remaining time that you are run out of, like CPU, memory, which are also considered critical, critical resources in our HCI node. So this dashboard can also tells you the CPU memory here, the time remaining for all resources, which are more congested right now, or CPU bound or the memory bound. In the last, on the upright, there's also a small view that tells you what are those opportunities in your cluster that you can actually optimize to free space. So that's example like you can actually free some additional space from some unused VMs. You probably just have those VMs shut down and put there for a long time. It just suggests you can maybe probably consider to reclaim from there. Or you have too many snapshots, you want to just optimize that to reclaim more space if you don't want to add more capacity. So that's the idea. That's the shipped feature in the native dashboard in VOps 6.6. But think of this functionality, exactly functionality, to be well integrated into the VC that is powered by VOps. And the whole life cycle of the new features into the VC powered by VOps is automatically managed by VOps itself. So you don't have to pay too much about the installation aspect of that. So turning to the next topic, so we know that as Christian initially mentioned, HCI is all about the integration of software, vSAN, and also there's a hardware aspect for that. So one of our big goal is how do we improve the overall hardware manageability and monitoring to the same single pane of glass. So I think there are some big opportunity that we are able to actually leverage what we know from the hardware side and to put this kind of hardware serviceability into one single class into the vCenter UI. I think this picture speaks to itself. It's basically show you a straightforward diagram of the server and show you what you can do with the UI interactively. So I will just going to show you the demo. So running? Okay. Yeah. So we just built this for our example Dell server, 730. You can actually look at each of disk, click each disk. There's a window in the window. There's I'm going to insert a new disk into the server slot. And instantly, I can go back to the UI and click flash. It's going to just refresh and reflect that new disk is up and running in the UI. You can basically also blink the disk. It instantly reflects in the physical server as well so that you can accurately locate the disk. You can also turn on that. For each of disk, you can see the disk health. It's well integrated into one UI. So I think the purpose of that is to give you a peace of mind in monitoring hardware and give you a much easier experience in managing the servers in terms like slots and disks, all that. And with that, I think we should wrap up, right?
We should. I mean, I think we've had enough content for this. So, just to sum it up, basically, these were the three topics that we talked about. Make lifecycle, every aspect of installation, upgrade, really simple. Second is, rich monitoring throughout the lifecycle of vSAN, day to day, when something goes wrong, or just day to day for capacity planning. And finally, infrastructure analytics, changing, how you do operations, changing how you manage your system, but also really changing your support experience, your whole relationship with VMware, how we help you when you call us, or flipping that around and us calling you, changing that relationship and really partnering even closer with you to deliver that vSAN goodness to you. So with that, I think let's open it up for Q&A. And thank you very much for joining us today. If you want to ask a question, ideally come up to the mic because it's recorded, and this will be helpful. But otherwise, just yell. Can you come to? It's just easier to hear.
Be recorded.
I think I asked this question in the previous vSAN demonstration we had earlier on, is where we're behind air-gapped systems. Is there ability, so I believe the export is in JSON format, yeah? In the vCloud analytics.
Right.
So can we export that and send that to you through an air-gapped system?
Right. So today we don't do that yet.
I know you don't do it, but it's a...
Yeah, so we, I think first we want to understand, for which cases will we be able to go with the system of anonymized sending through proxies and such. But I do think air gap is a very important thing. This is not going away, right? This is something that's here to stay. You're running this on mission critical infrastructure that sometimes, like, the servers that are connected to the power grid, I probably don't want to actually expose them to the internet in any shape or form. That's fine. So yes, for example, the cloud connected health, we are thinking of, in the next release, bundle everything up that we've developed on the cloud, send it, bundle it into the platform, so the next release you actually get all that goodness. So you get it slower, but you still get it. So yes, we're looking towards ways of facilitating that. Actually uploading stuff to us, or giving new software to you from the cloud, actually packaged into the bundle.
The tools that you use in GSS,
yeah. So the question was, the tools that we use, can we make them available? And actually, one thing that we didn't get done in time, but we want to consider a VMware Fling. To get the tooling to take our performance database and exposing it to Grafana, that code, because a lot of people like using Grafana more than they use the vSphere web client for looking at performance, getting that out as an open source Fling. I think if there's interest, let us know, because I believe this would be useful. All right?
I have a question on the self-healing systems. GSS calling us is a good idea, but how about doing a self-healing systems and down the line where machine learning takes over and takes care of your system, so you don't have to make any calls, or the GSS has to make any calls?
So to me, we're already well on our way, right? We have developed vSAN Health, which is all about automatically detecting issues, remediating them, and so we basically, the way I look at it, we have the on-prem capabilities, but we need to bring up our support capabilities to be on par. That doesn't mean that we want you to call GSS all the time. It just means that if you need to call them, we have those capabilities. The other aspect to this is performance. For example, performance analytics is really hard. Telling you exactly what a performance issue is with 100% accuracy is really hard. Getting to 80% is much easier. So the initial goal is that we basically use that experience in GSS, tune those systems, gain that confidence in our systems, and as they mature, we then bring it back to you and allow you to do the same. Because what we notice is that if we show you something and it's wrong, that's not good for you either. So our GSS will need to absorb that, they need to deal with that inaccuracy, but as it matures, we definitely want to get it back to you so that you don't even need to call GSS. You can either remediate it yourself, or we build it into an intelligent system that automatically remediates underneath the covers.
In case of external storage, if the disk goes bad, I can hot swap it. But in case of vSAN, I found that if the disk is bad, I have to shut down the whole server, and I have to format it with RAID 0 before it can be integrated into the vSAN. Isn't that true?
That is actually not true, so let me explain. So first of all, the whole cluster in our system is a hot swap, right? Because normally in a traditional storage array, you have one RAID group, you have one disk go bad, now you need a one-to-one replacement of a new disk. In vSAN, the whole cluster is your hot spare. So you don't need to add a new disk and do something. Basically, the whole cluster is now a target. So we will sprinkle the data that used to be on that disk that failed, and we'll sprinkle that across the cluster. Everybody gets a little piece, and everybody also provides a little piece from a reading perspective, reading the other copy of the data. So overall, this is much faster. This is a much faster paradigm compared to actually doing a hot swap of an individual drive. The other aspect you mentioned is that you need to shut down a server and do a RAID 0. That depends heavily on which hardware you use, right? We provide you with a wide spread of different hardware choices. For pass-through controllers, that's definitely not the case. You just plug in the drive, it appears, you don't need to do anything. For certain RAID controllers, you might need to go to the RAID controller software and create the RAID 0. For that, however, oftentimes, for example, for LSI-based controllers, Dell controllers, you can do that from the CLI. So we actually ask you as part of the firmware patching, for example, to install that vendor tool. Once you have that installed, we use it to validate your controller settings. And you can also use it to actually configure RAID 0 if you need to. So you don't need to shut down the server. You can actually do that from the CLI on the running server, if you have one of these controllers.
No, I have 820, Dell PowerEdge 820, and it's only a year old. Also, we could. It is vSAN is not 6.6; it is only 6.1. Would that make a difference?
No, in that case, it wouldn't make a difference. It's important that you have the vendor tool installed, though, if you want to use that workflow. Otherwise, you would need to go down to the BIOS, and that would require the reboot. Right. So maybe we can talk afterwards, and I can give you some pointers.
Question.
Sure.
With the vSAN, there is only one store, one data store.
Right.
Now, with the regular external storage, we can have multiple data stores. So we can do storage vMotion with the external. So is there a way to do storage vMotion, or in the future can there be more than one vSAN data stores?
Well, so think about it differently. I actually hate the fact that for traditional storage you have to carve it up into 20 different data stores to get around scalability problems. Do you want that?
There is advantage to it. Suppose I rename a VM. The internal files are still named old way.
But,
if I do storage,
sure. But wouldn't you rather have a system where you can just rename the VM rather than having to do a storage remotion to rename a VM? So I would much rather fix it properly than use the workaround.
You don't understand that. If I rename a VM, the internal files do not get changed.
I know, but see, the way to fix that is not to introduce multiple data stores so that you can do a storage vMotion to change a file name. The fix is let you change the file name.
Or is it possible?
It's not possible right now, but we want to fix it, and the right fix is to let you change the file name instead of enabling you to do a vMotion and complicate your management.
That is the only workaround right now.
Yes, but given that we need to do a fix, I would rather do the right fix.
Yes, I also echo that when you change a VM, it should change the file name.
Yes.
Going back to with VUM and patching and all that kind of stuff, we've had we've primarily got vSAN, like 40 nodes or so, where we've got a test cluster of HyperFlex, and this really has sort of cemented the need for something like that. So I'm really excited to see the firmware and stuff coming into it. But I'm curious, we're a Cisco UCS shop, and there's a lot more orchestration involved in firmware patching and stuff. Is that something you foresee being actually orchestrated as part of through that, or will that be?
So ultimately, we showed Dell here. This is just an example. We want to enable the ecosystem. We want to have that choice for you, right? That you can buy a whole bunch of different vendors. So Cisco UCS is a platform that a lot of our customers use. So from our perspective, that is something we need to enable. And in fact, when we were working on the initial feature for 6.6 of only doing controller patching, one of the reasons we didn't include Cisco was because Cisco told us they would like to do this model of a full stack update because they don't do individual controller updates in their model. So this is partially the whole design is to accommodate vendors that have that philosophy. So definitely that is something we do want to accomplish.
Okay, thanks.
Sorry, linking on to your question there. How does this integrate with auto-deploy then?
The question is, how does it integrate with auto-deploy? That's a longer answer, and I have 1 minute and 4 seconds, so come to me afterwards.
2 questions regarding the iSCSI and migration paths going to 6.6. In that now iSCSI, you can hook it up to physical servers and or virtual VM with using iSCSI software. Is there going to be any native built-in to allow it to directly to other vCenter hosts so that you can do ease of manageability of migrations?
Well, so let me put it differently. So you're basically asking, can we use iSCSI as a way of having multiple clusters accessing each other's vSAN storage?
In part of trying to get migrations into the new platforms.
So to me, iSCSI is really, we're enabling it because there's a certain non-vSAN world out there that we need to connect to. When we're talking vSAN, iSCSI is not the right protocol. So do we want to enable the case where two clusters can access each other? I think that's a worthwhile question. Do we want to do that for iSCSI? I think that's the wrong way of doing it.
I'm looking at it from the process of getting to vSAN where you have to do an offline
so,
for the most part.
I mean, ultimately, you just care about it working. We care, we're looking at what's the best way. And I think we're out of time, and I don't know if we're supposed to get kicked out, but if you have more questions, feel free to drop by afterwards, and we have another 20, 30 minutes. Thank you.